guys, I'm Devina. Welcome to my channel Open Your Mind, where we explore fascinating spiritual practices in a modern day context. Now, on this series of videos, we're going to learn all about NLP or Neuro Linguistic Programming. NLP was created in the 70s and is a combination of a spiritual and a scientific practice that enables one to master one's mind through a series of simple but profound mental reprogramming or rewiring tools. Without further ado, we're going to learn all about this and much more with the lovely Manjiri Latey, who is an experienced NLP practitioner and teacher. If you find these conversations valuable, please do hit the subscribe button below, comment, like, and share these videos. Manjiri, today we're in conversation about a really interesting but yet quite unknown topic. At least is what I think. It's something that's so helpful in this day and age of therapy, and people are actively seeking the practices of mindfulness and being more aware and connected with themselves and upgrading their way of thinking and perceiving life. And that brings us to the topic at hand, which is NLP or Neuro Linguistic Programming. I'd love to really just deep dive into it but start with the basics actually. The name Neuro Linguistic Programming, what does it mean exactly?
This pandemic has probably brought out either the most challenging parts of someone's personality or brought out some of the most beautiful aspects of their life as well.
Yes.
And let's use probably the background of NLP to put it into perspective. Okay, so let's break down what the phrase means.
Yes.
Neuro, linguistic and programming, right? So neuro, as a common man would typically understand, is anything to do with neurology or the brain.
Right.
Linguistic is language, both what is spoken out loud, what you hear, okay, and probably a third aspect, and the most important, is what you say to yourself internally. So language as is commonly understood, and then programming implying that there is a structure.
Right.
Right. So if you were to put it together, and let's say you can reprogram yourself, okay, or you can reprogram your central nervous system using language. Okay.
Wow.
And in NLP, we believe that till your inside world does not change, your outside world will not change.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So a lot of reprogramming, realignment typically starts with focusing on the self, internal housekeeping, realigning those things. And automatically, it's almost as if you were wearing a pair of sunglasses that were yellow. You will see the entire world jaundiced. But the minute you remove that, which was your choice to put them on to begin with, and the minute you remove that, you see a far clearer picture of everything around you. In a nutshell, a common man understand what NLP stands for: reprogramming your central nervous system using language.
Can we go back a little bit into the origins of it, just to understand how it developed and what was the need perhaps? Also, the way you've just described it as an internal journey first, it sounds like quite a spiritual approach, but the name sounds very scientific.
Probably the irony of how it has been put together as a phrase. However, when you ask, does it have a spiritual backdrop or undertone? Undoubtedly, yes. Everything around us will have a nature of spirituality to it, a spirituality in terms of one's emotional growth, one's growth and understanding of a wider perspective of something. Then spirituality in that sense, definitely yes. Yeah. And let's go back into its origins and its timeline. Let's spark that. Okay.
Yes.
And two of the main people associated with NLP are, one is Richard Bandler and John Grinder. Okay.
Right.
And Richard Bandler was a mathematician who was understanding the structure of behavior mathematically. Okay. And the other is John Grinder, who was a professor of linguistics. Right. And they both came together and said language and structure. So every behavior has a structure. Once you understand the structure, then you can toy around with it and change the building blocks. Okay. What both of them did in their own study or body of work was studied specific individuals. So one of the first people they definitely studied and broke down his practice in terms of what made him so brilliant. So breaking down his building blocks for excellence is Dr. Milton Erickson.
Okay.
He is one of the world's greatest known hypnotherapists, okay?
Wow.
The Ericksonian method of hypnotherapy.
Yes.
And Dr. Milton Erickson himself had massive health issues with an attack of polio when he was much younger. And he brought himself out of it.
Wow.
Using beautiful self-hypnosis, observing what people are doing around to become one of the world's greatest hypnotherapists. Okay. The second individual they studied is Dr. Fritz Perls, who is known for the Gestalt therapy.
Yes.
Or the Gestalt work. And the third individual they studied was Virginia Satir, who is known for her work in the family therapy space. Okay. And they studied some others as well, whose work augmented their NLP model.
Yes.
One of them was Frank Firelli, who came up with something called as provocative therapy. Okay.
Right.
And when we say provocative, to provoke does not mean to instigate.
Okay.
But to provoke actually means to initiate a new thought process, to initiate another way of thinking or being. Okay, so he came up with provocative therapy.
Yes.
There were many other people whose work added to, I mean, there are rivers coming to this one sea. This post-war period, after World War II, what the Americans were feeling was very different from what they as a culture felt right after the Vietnam War. Okay,
Right.
If you go back into the way history played itself out.
Yes.
And there was a lot of energy in the society in America specifically that was fueling towards protest and revolting.
Yes.
And that was probably where healing needed to be done most, mental, psychological healing. And John and Richard's work couldn't be more timed perfectly, okay, where they realized that people were just going for therapy after therapy, but there was something that needed to be done differently so that they were moving towards self-healing, more towards excellence, rather than getting into a rut of saying, I'm going to go from one therapist to another.
Right.
And then it's like, you know, a little recipe book that they put together.
Okay.
Where if you want excellence in something, you go refer to this recipe book.
Right.
So NLP is actually called the science of modeling excellence, where you role model excellence. And from the 1970s, it has metamorphosed beautifully. This science specifically, like many other sciences around us, is so evolving. Today, there are so many different schools attributing to NLP in terms of schools of thoughts, ways of being. John himself has gone on to create something called as the new code NLP, which is more unconscious work related to what was earlier known as the classic code. Okay.
Right.
So just as a plotting of its timeline, and it's still evolving, and it will continue to evolve, I'm sure.
Right. Right, so you've mentioned basically as kind of the backbone or the inspiration behind NLP evolving some of the most famous schools of psychology. You've also mentioned hypnosis and hypnotherapy as an important milestone in its development. So what would you say then is the difference? What makes NLP different and stand out beyond the schools of psychology or even hypnosis that we've known of?
A lot of traditional approaches work with digging up in identifying what is wrong with somebody. And then if you see, there's a lot of labeling. Okay. You have this syndrome, you have this issue going on. And then thanks to Google, people, the minute a phrase is thrown out, will go and look it up. And whether they fit that bill or not, because conforming to something or fitting in is such a human need nowadays. Even if they are not fitting in with that, the symptoms will start being duplicated in their body just because they want to fulfill, if I may say, fulfill the needs of fitting into a tag of so-and-so syndrome. Okay. So a lot of traditional approaches, it is said that study the ill in curing the well. Okay. So there's a lot of study of the ill in curing the well. NLP, on the other hand, studies the well in understanding what makes them well. so that there is no concept of ill in that case, or there is no concept of dysfunctionality. What is functioning perfectly well? In the same scenario, people are flourishing, and in the same scenario, if somebody is, breaking down every day, then this person is doing something beautifully different than what this person is doing. So if I were to enter that scenario, I would rather model myself on this individual who is achieving excellent outcomes in the same situation rather than somebody who's breaking down. And this person can cross the bridge very easily, just knowing what is your recipe and cross the bridge. So NLP studies the well and understanding what makes them well, and that is why it is a model of excellence. A lot of techniques, tools, and processes in NLP don't even dig into the past in a conscious level, because every time you go into re-narrating in a therapy context something that has happened to you in the past, every time you re-narrate it, you're reliving it, making that episode stronger and deeper in your neural pathways, rather than saying, okay, if you don't want this, how do you rather want to be? So you're moving more towards an outcome rather than how you don't want to be. You're focusing on how you'd rather want to be. And that is a very basic difference between a lot of traditional approaches versus what NLP would do.
I have heard hypnotherapy, the term hypnotherapy spoken in conjunction with NLP. So what's really, is there any connection between the two?
So people have very different perspectives towards hypnosis. They've either seen stage shows where somebody's hypnotized to do something. Also, there's an underlying assumption that when you are hypnotized, you are losing control of decision making and things like that. And this is what I have seen people speak of hypnosis. But all of us today, when we go buy something, marketing is waking hypnosis. We are hypnotized by our beliefs. We are hypnotized by schools of thought that we subscribe to. Okay. So hypnosis, in a way, we're constantly hypnotized anyway. You either choose in a certain way, or it's going to happen by default on auto mode, right? So hypnosis is actually using language to get specific outcomes, and use language. And there are many layers to language. There is tonality, there is diction, there is grammar, there is a deep language structure. Hypnosis, typically we can say in a layman's term, is language that is used with its many layers to bring about specific change. You can either start deleting aspects of your past after retracting, or rather removing the learnings from it, and then let that past go. Hypnosis is used for beautiful self-work and change work. And because NLP has language as a major aspect of it, hypnosis does fall under it as one of the known, unknown, conscious, unconscious parts of the process. And so at any given point of time, we're anyway hypnotized by some beliefs, and you'd rather than choose consciously a certain school of thought that you would like to subscribe to, than just get sucked into something.